Welcome to CMO Confidential, the podcast that takes you inside the drama, decisions, and choices that go with being the head of marketing. Hosted by five-time CMO Mike Linton.
Welcome, marketers, advertisers, and those who love them to Chief Marketing Officer Confidential. CMO Confidential is a program that takes you inside the drama, the decisions, and the politics that go with being the head of marketing at any company in what is one of the most scrutinized jobs in the executive suite. I'm Mike Linton, the former Chief Marketing Officer of Best Buy, eBay, Farmers Insurance, and Ancestry.com, here today with my guest, Babs Rangaiah. Today's topic, what marketers talk about behind closed doors, the artificial intelligence edition. Now, Babs has had a very diverse career. He worked at startups like Agency.com during the dot-com boom, led global digital transformation at Unilever, helped launch Paramount Plus, and has deep experience working with AI on Watson with IBM. He currently runs his own company called CCBabs. What a great creative title, which specializes in coaching, digital transformation, and marketing. Full disclosure, Babs and I are both CMO coaches and instructors at CMO Bootcamp. He is here today to talk about what stresses out CMOs with a special focus on that ongoing red hot topic that keeps on giving, artificial intelligence. Welcome, Babs.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
All right, Babs, give us an overview on what you are hearing from your marketing clients. Like, what's keeping them up at night? What do they talk about with you that they don't talk about in public?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm an executive coach, so I do get kind of some insights from people that I'm coaching, senior marketers, that you may not hear on kind of the stages at Cannes and whatnot. So, for me, in the last year or so, I think the biggest issues, separately from AI, of course, is for a long time it was about the economy, and still not completely stable, but for a long time there was a lot of budget cuts and concerns about where the economy was going. But I think the biggest vulnerability that I hear that you really don't hear much about is really in data and MarTech and this whole post-cookie approach. There's, the data clean rooms and how to organize and capture and harness data is kind of newer skill set.
Give us an overview of the data topic. And then we can drill into the subtopics, which you're drilling out, which is, the marketer has so much data coming. It's probably now one of the biggest data consumers in the company. Tell us, write the story large, and then give us those subsets you were just talking about.
Yes, I think the broader issue is around the cookie deprecation. So this idea that you won't be able to target in the same manner that you have been for, the last decade or two in digital is, caused kind of a big shift in the way marketers, especially, brand type marketers, in how they go about reaching their consumers. So there's been a much bigger push towards getting first party data, capturing it, organizing it, and then figuring out a way to harness that. And again, that's not been kind of the primary skill sets or competencies that most CMOs have grown up with, especially those who are of a certain age. And
so I hear beneath that statement, fear that I don't know how to do it. And I also don't even know maybe how to rent it or get the right vendor. Is that true?
Right. Well, I'll give you a great example. So I have a CMO who I'm coaching, who was talking to me about his marketing stack, and they have a line item for Adobe on his budget that came over from IT for $50 million, and he literally was like, "So, I'm a coach, but I'm also kind of this coach-sultant, so to speak."
Yeah.
For some guys, and they're kind of looking for insights. Also, given that I was in the business for so long and deeply into digital and data and so forth. And he literally had no idea what he was getting for that 50 million. Now, most other areas of marketing, they can cut or move or shift or figure out, what kind of return they're getting. And even if it's not directly specific returns, they have some sense of what it's for. And in this case, the guy literally was like, he might as well have been Photoshop. Like he's like,
Yeah.
what am I getting from Adobe that costs $50 million? And that's typical of a MarTech stack when you have all the suppliers there. Many of them, they wouldn't have either heard of or known much about what value they're adding and why they're using it. So those kind of things are really, difficult to deal with.
And then if you're sitting in that, because I'm guessing we have a bunch of listeners that actually wouldn't know what's in the line item or might not, they just look at that 50 million bucks, which pretty big number. And the MarTech stack is usually a really big number. Sometimes you even have your own people. What should they do to understand what's in that number without actually, because a bunch of people are going to say, oh my gosh, I don't want to just tell the company I don't know what's in my $50 million line item.
Well, and I think that's exactly right. I think there's a number of things. One of which is if you have the confidence, then you obviously could, get details from both your team, your underlings, as well as the suppliers themselves, and try to learn more about, what it is that they're getting and how the whole MarTech stack works. I mean, that requires some level of research, curiosity, and time to really spend to understand all of that. But some people don't have the time nor the desire nor the ego that allows them to be able to do that. And that's partly why they hire me, actually. They hire coaches for exactly that reason.
But I would say beneath that is you better figure it out one way or the other. Like not knowing is you're going to fall farther and farther behind, because right on the tail of that, we discussed this a little bit, before this recording is you got everything going on in, media is exploding. You got TikTok, you have all these things you have to follow on with and understand. And there's more tools than you can keep track of, much less integrate. So I'm going to wrap up the MarTech stack by saying, don't fawn it all off or pawn it all off. Learn how it works.
Yeah.
But then let's talk about the other stuff that's coming through your office. All the different media stuff.
Yeah, I mean, so, after the economy and data, I think you're really seeing, trying to get an understanding of the new media landscape, which, with the long and tedious and now precipitous drops really in linear television, the 30-second ad really is something that doesn't even get the scale that it once did. And so the advent of CTV, TikTok is a huge, kind of channel and media that you really have to understand in today's world. Retail media networks, all of those things are on the minds of marketers and figuring out how to best utilize those as part of their overall channel mix. The other thing is the workforce. Post-COVID, this whole remote hybrid approach to the office is not changing. You're not going to get people back in the office 5 days a week. And there's a real kind of feeling of what is the best option here? What is the best approach? Should it be 2 days? Should it be 3 days? I had one's,
Wait, I want to ask two parts before you move on to this. So what's the answer to number one? I got all these new medias, some of which I didn't grow up with, maybe.
Yeah.
And then we have the remote work, and let's just throw the team collaboration, innovation on those. Yeah. What should you do if you're in the executive seat dealing with these two issues? The first, all these exploding medias.
Yeah, I mean, so look, the number of thing. I mean, the media thing, I think is actually it's positive, it's innovative, it gives you a chance to do some things that for many, many years were impossible to do, whether that's, the addressability that comes with CTV, ACR kind of technology that really allows you to see, who saw an ad and then what action they took.
Right.
TikTok is maybe the most powerful media we've ever seen in terms of
which might be regulated any minute.
Well, yeah, it might be gone, but for now it's it's just one of the most powerful media we've ever known in terms of driving word of mouth and driving sales. Actually, people buy things directly from what they see on TikTok. And the retail media networks are, that is point of purchase to some extent. And you're really looking at combining the abilities of media and in-store together in these retail media networks that are, all of a sudden becoming some of the biggest players in the game, especially Amazon, right there with Facebook and Google and so forth.
And so what are you telling them? That you should be playing in this as fast as possible, or you should rent it? Or we haven't even got to the big topic of the day, AI, but we've got, we basically said, look, know your line items, know your new media. And now we have the remote work thing. What should they be doing with remote work? Because at least my experience is it's in the way of collaboration and innovation for new stuff, not for established stuff. But tell us what people are telling you.
Well, you know what I found? One of the guys that I coach had a great approach to it, because I think there isn't one exact way. I think you have to find out what works best for your organization. There's certainly some benefits, of remote, but I think there's a lot being missed, especially for younger employees, by not being in an office. I mean, when we were young, we learned from our leaders, right? By watching them. They were right down the hall, and we'd see them, how they present, how they, what their presence is, and, how they go about critical thinking.
And you could have coffee with them or lunch and then dissect a whole meeting. That's a lot harder.
Walk into the office, right? I mean, there's just a whole bunch of stuff that you're not getting. So there has to be some way of bringing those two things together. And, I think that one guy had a great approach that because a lot of people had moved during COVID. So what he does is, instead of 1 or 2 days in the office, he has it totally remote for 3 weeks out of every month. And for 1 week, everybody comes in. So even if you moved, you're not necessarily, you don't have to worry about commuting. If it's only 1 week a month, you come in, and for that week, you collaborate, you work together, everyone's in the office. And then on the Thursday of that week, all of them go out together that night and, have almost like an offsite type thing every, once a month. And he's like, I get better conversations and have gotten closer to more junior employees in this approach than I ever did by working inside the office. So I think there's different ways. I think the training has to be more formalized. That's part of why I do these executive presence workshops, because again, we learned all that just by being around it, and, training in more specific, and coaching in more specific skill sets like that, I think, are important.
So what you just said about the 1 weekend and then the compression of social in one night is, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
Is that a best practice in your mind, given what you've seen?
He's had a lot of success with it, I think, because it's basically solved the issue of the people that have moved without having to make them move back, or essentially fire them or have them be 100% remote. It's solved the issue of some people are in some days, some people are not another day. The true collaboration of working together in an office environment for a full week every month is very much like, being in an office 24, whatever, 360. Yeah.
Well, I like that, because it compresses all the good stuff in a week where everyone is on their A game, because that's the 1 week we're going to do it.
Right. So, because a lot of people, they come in 2 days a week, but everyone's still on Zoom because a whole bunch of other people are, not in the office. So you don't really get past this, this kind of Zoom approach. And so I think that is something that I see as a best practice, because he's had a lot of success with it. People really like it. The employees are happy. He's happy because people are really working together, collaborating live. People are getting to know each other well, and he's getting actually better connection with his own employees because of the Thursday night, dinner and so forth.
And it's super. I like it's structured. It's structured, knowable, plannable. I think that is really a good idea.
Yeah.
We also are, it's hard not to read the press kind of almost every week or two. We're talking about, sometimes we did a whole show, it's the best of times, the worst of times for the CMO. It's hard sometimes not to think it's still a really tough time for the CMO. We did a show with Seth Matlins on it's probably the hardest job in the C-suite. What are you hearing people talk about behind the scenes of what it's like to be in the job?
Well, I mean, that's the other, so beyond all the things we talked about, I think their own careers and this concept of the demise of the CMO is something that's obviously on their minds as well. And as we talked about kind of before, the CMO role itself is so dramatically different than it was when a lot of the CMOs grew up in marketing, right? There's so
Yeah.
many, between customer experience and product marketing and creative and now social and PR and consumer and trade events and paid media and earned media and website. And especially now with the new technologies coming in, it's just a different role. Nobody has expertise in all of that in the way that you used to be able to kind of lead your team because you knew it, you grew up in it. You learn a lot and you're kind of passing that knowledge along as you're also trying to build your business. And I think now we're seeing that that's obviously a much more difficult and complex environment. But it's a different. There's a great when we came up, the thing that distinguished people was your IQ. Who was smarter.
Yeah.
Now it's like, and then it was IQ, then EQ, and I think there's a big feeling now that this concept of CQ, right, your curiosity quotient, is maybe your most important trait because you're never going to know everything. What you got to be is curious enough to listen and want to know more and learn more and keep up with things as they're changing so dramatically and so rapidly. And so
I
that's
think
really,
that's
I think, the skill set that you need.
a super important point. We had Jim Stengel on, the former CMO of
Yeah.
P&G, and his thing was curiosity, and Seth also, Matlin, said this, is the most important characteristic you have because you can't keep up with all the tools if you're
Right.
not going to investigate them personally.
That's right. I
And
think
you can be super smart, but if you're not going to learn new stuff, you're super smart will run out.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, let's talk about the topic of the day, the big topic, artificial intelligence. In addition, all the stuff we just talked about, big data, TikTok, pressure on the job, you're at the forefront of technology, meeting the customer, meeting the company. Now you put AI in.
Yeah.
At a topic no one can avoid, no matter almost what they're doing.
Yeah.
What's happening in the marketing landscape with AI? And then, draw some dimensions, B2B, B2C, like big companies, little companies. Tell us what's going on there.
Well, so first of all, I think, marketers might actually be able to leverage AI more than most other functions of business because at its core, marketing's core activities are really understanding consumer insights, matching them to products and services, and doing that via engaging content to influence and persuade people, right? So all things that AI and especially generative AI is made for. So the landscape is such that this is going to be something that marketers, if you're on top of it and you're curious and you understand it, that you could really use as a huge kind of competitive advantage if you're on it, and could get killed if you don't, right? Like that's the kind of thing it has. As far as the as far as the landscape goes, most people aren't doing very much other than, kind of setting themselves up if they can, and talking to consultants and talking to companies about what they should be doing today, and starting to do pilots. I think you're not seeing any huge scale transformations yet. But I think you will shortly. The market itself externally, I mean, obviously ChatGPT, but there's so many properties. I was in Silicon Valley a month or so ago, and that's all anyone talks about there. And the amount of money and the frenzy that's going on in the companies that are launching this space is staggering.
It is staggering, but a couple quick questions. If you're a big company, is it easier for you than if you're a small company to use AI? And then is B2B or B2C more likely to fit AI on the marketing front?
I don't know that there's going to be, so let's think about what AI could be used for in marketing, right? From a creative standpoint, it's personalization and it's content creation and copywriting, things like that. You need to do both of those things. I mean, whether you're B2B or B2C, both of those things are critical. I think you may be able to see from a B2B standpoint more direct and shorter term benefits from it because, it's a smaller audience typically, and there's very specific businesses,
Right.
especially from an account-based standpoint. You can get information, organize it, and capture it in a way and in a speed that you haven't been able to before, and be able to take immediate action on that and automate those things. Consumers, obviously, there's far more consumers than there are businesses, so I think there's that. But broadly, the issues are the same. That's what we're trying to do. From a media standpoint, a consumer standpoint, like you're going to media planning, programmatic buying, optimization, targeting, all those things are things that are going to be significantly changed and improved using automation and artificial intelligence that will probably benefit more the B2C B2C businesses. And then the measurement, right? The measurement is, I think, the thing that really could shift from this, market intelligence, the AI tools that can quickly process and analyze, competitor data to identify market trends and opportunities at scale, getting insights, all of those things, I think from a consumer standpoint is going to be huge. But from a business standpoint, I think we'll have a much better chance for you to be able to recognize ROI and, where you're closing deals and where you're not.
So we've had a couple guests on from particularly big agencies and data people. And one of the things they said is if you don't have a good database, if you put AI in a crappy database, you will get really crappy AI.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's talk about that. How do you know if you have a good database or not?
I mean, that's the first thing you have to do when they talk about kind of, what you have to do today to get yourself prepared. You have to be able to clean your data. And if you have good data or if you don't. I mean, if data has been an important part of your business for a long time and you've lived and died it, or you're a direct to consumer type company or an e-commerce based company, you're going to have great data because you've been doing it for ages. I think the companies that are going to have challenges are the people that have not had to really rely on first party data and clean, polished data because they've gone after mass audiences for so long.
So give us an industry that you think will have the hardest time with this.
CPG, I think, will have a hard time.
Yeah.
Not so much with AI in general, because they also have resources and marketing tends to be, a bigger. A
lot of times at the center of the company.
Yeah, it's the leading area of the company, so they'll put whatever they have to get in place, but they won't have the kind of clean, polished, organized data than a lot of companies that the rely on that already will have. So that'll be a challenge for them. But I mean, I think, look, when you're talking about what you need to do today to get yourself prepared, data is a piece of it. I think, doing pilots is very important. I think getting your sense of how to leverage AI will give you a better understanding of how and, the data that you have is going to be impacted and how it can impact what you get out of it.
Give us an example of some of the pilots you are seeing that you think are really good uses of AI, marketers being on the frontier of AI.
Well, so so there's not I'm doing a bunch. I work with a company called Traction and InstaLily, where we're doing, this future-proof project where we work with companies to do pilots. I mean, essentially like education and then actually developing a MVP.
Yeah.
And there's so many. I mean, the one we're doing with a celebrity agency where we're helping to, right now one of the issues with celebrity companies is it was great when there were big celebrities, but now influencers are becoming really just as critical and more cost effective and so forth. But there's millions of them.
Millions.
So using AI to kind of understand like who is best matched to your business, to figure out kind of the right influencers is an opportunity we're working on right now. I mean, there's a number of pilots that people are doing in the personalization space and trying to really figure out how we can get the right message to the right person at the right time. I think I also worked on Watson for a long time, so I think some of the examples there can be used in generative AI.
Give us a couple great Watson examples.
Well, so like for the U.S. Open, for example, we created so normally at the end, there's all different matches going on at the same time, so it's hard to kind of get the highlights from each piece. And we used Watson, so you'd have to have a bunch of people, and then it takes tons of time editing. And we had Watson create the highlight reel at the end of the day to send up to CBS or whoever's covering
Yeah.
the U.S. Open. And Watson can gauge highlights based on, when players go like this, and
Yeah.
when the people clap, even in its mild form. Like it can understand what represents the highlights, and then it's much easier to edit because now you've got all this thing that Watson has decided is a highlight. You look at it, and within much shorter periods of time, and you can get that right up to the network. That's a great one. We created trailers for 20th Century Fox for movies that normally take 6 months, a bunch of editing, a bunch of people.
Right.
And same thing, it can check the highlights based on all the other movies that are in that genre and create a movie trailer. But my favorite Watson thing is always the one where they had a big kind of relationship with the Cleveland Clinic and really wanted to use Watson for healthcare purposes. But this just showed the power of it to me. Was they did a pilot with, they're trying to figure out diseases of people they couldn't solve. And there was a kid who was sick, and he'd been to like 6 doctors over 7 or 8 months. Nobody could figure out what was wrong with him. He still remained sick. And then we used Watson, and Watson was able to read. This is the part that I thought was ridiculous. Watson read every New England Journal of Medicine ever written in minutes, right?
Yeah.
And then was able to combine that data with all the doctors' notes, both handwritten, which could, artificial intelligence can read kind of visuals as well as text and video and all that, and combine that with the doctor's notes and the reports and all the information in the New England Journal of Medicine's everyone that was ever written to come up with a 94% confidence rate what was wrong. And it turned out to be right. Like that was the thing. It was called Kawasaki syndrome or something. And it was one thing that happened.
So it's like a version of House, except in 4 seconds.
Yeah, in seconds. I mean, that's really what AI is all about, right? It's about scale and about being able to kind of capture information that would take, forever for something. No human, no matter how much of a genius you are, is going to be able to read all the Journal of Medicine and recall it and then be able to compare that. So
yeah, I've only read a couple years worth last weekend.
Yeah.
Hey, so in all those instances, and I want to check one of the things. One of our earlier guests, a futurist, said, "Look, generative AI, it's like it's in its infancy, and it's like having 1 million teenage interns working for you. It will produce outcomes because it wants a really great reference, but you always need a human in between it and the final answer." And I think everything you gave me almost always had a human looking at it before it went out. So it can't be trusted with the full interface. It can be trusted up to the interface. Is that how you see it now?
Yeah, I think to some extent that is right. I mean, it's also the very, very earliest stages of
first inning.
So I think in the long run, you probably will be able to do some things without human editing at the end, at least not much. When it becomes real, when we have great data and it's really much more polished, I think that'll probably happen more. But I do think today, yeah, there's an absolute need for human. I also think the most important skill sets, I mean, when we talk about things you need to do today, part of it is, understanding artificial intelligence. Part of it's getting data in place and all that. But also one of the biggest things I think is really developing your human skills, the most important human skills that will distinguish, you from me. Because at the end of the day, we're all going to have the same information now, right? The smartest guy is going to have the same, the dumbest guy is going to have the same information as the smartest guy, in seconds. So what does it really matter? It's really about, how you communicate, how you tell your story, how you take that same information and think more creatively about what to do with it. All those things are things that are going to distinguish you from me, from somebody else, So it's really about building the human. It's kind of a counterintuitive, but building the human skills, I believe, are going to be the most important things for those who, for companies and people that'll have a competitive advantage.
So Babs, give me how, if I'm sitting in the seat now and I want to start building those human skills, What am I building exactly? Or what should I start with in building the human skills?
I think the first and foremost important thing is your communication skills, because you are going to have, so if you and I have the same information, right? We
Yeah.
get a bunch of data, we've got a report, we've got a influencing others is going to require our ability to communicate that, to tell that story in a way that's compelling and engaging to whoever's receiving it. That is a big skill that can easily be taught and can be learned and will have to be in order to win. Warren Buffett, who you would think, he was interviewed on CNBC and they said, "What was your greatest investment that you ever made?" And you would have thought like, "Oh, I was early in Amazon or early in Meta, whatever." And he said, "The greatest investment I ever made was in an executive presence and communications class that I took with Dale Carnegie, a long time ago when I was in my 30s in my career. That course, more than anything, I attribute to my success." Now, here's a guy, he's not some big like speaker, charismatic guy. He's not Tony Robbins or anything. He's actually a finance guy. He's a financier, mostly in a desk in an office, right? But even with that, he says that his communication skills, his writing skills, his ability to tell those stories to analysts and the media and to companies has been as responsible or more responsible for his success than anything else that he's had to do, which is to me really interesting, because even for a guy like that. So I think especially in marketing, where that, communication skills are probably our most important skills as we try to market both our brands and manage our teams and all that. But I
Got it.
also think, pushing creativity, curiosity, imagination, one thing I always try to push this idea of, I'll give you a great example about how a human being can reframe, because I think reframing is something that's going to be important as well in your storytelling. When radio first started, it was this, big, ugly brown box, and it was replacing newspapers as the next medium.
Yep.
People used to read 3 newspapers a day. There was this guy by the name of David Sarnoff who worked at RCA, which was one of the big radio manufacturers. And he had this big idea to run the heavyweight fight on the radio. And at that time, the only thing people got from media was news, because that's what newspapers were. So he pushed this idea to his management, and they were like, "Ah, it's a dumb idea, radio's for news." And he's like, "Well, no, newspapers were for news, but this is like a live broadcast that we could." The heavyweight fight at that time was like the Super Bowl. It's like this big event, and no one ever gets to see it live. They always have to wait the next day and read about it in the paper. Anyway, so he reframed what radio could be for that time. Media used to be about news. Now he's saying it's about this. And that particular, so there's so many lessons learned from this, which could be used during this AI period, where management kept saying no, and he kept pushing. So persistence is important. Secondly, he ultimately management relents. So if you have a guy who's really leading and innovating and really wants to do it, you could probably get it done. But classically, management says, "Fine, go ahead and do that as a pilot or something, but we're not going to fund it. You have to fund it within your own budget," which again, very typical of companies, right? Fine, do it. They figured, he'll never do it, or, it won't matter. It'll be this tiny thing in the side. So he does it. He's like so persistent and determined to get this done. Hires one broadcaster. He goes to the fight. He broadcasts. That one event changed the course.
So that one event was a knockout.
No, look at you, Mike Linton.
I'm killing myself today.
All right. But anyway, so radio became the biggest, then all of a sudden they ran music and soap operas and all, and actually Procter & Gamble created soap operas on the radio, all of that stuff. But it all emanated from the fact that this guy, who later, by the way, got promoted and became CEO of RCA ultimately, and then of NBC, which bought RCA. And he's now like this famous media guy, because he reframed, and he had an incredible, he had the imagination and the persistence to do that. Those human qualities will continue to matter no matter what technology and no matter what media comes in, because, even like with artificial intelligence, we just rattled off types of things we can do. But guess what? Somebody is going to reframe it and come up with something same way kind of ChatGPT came out of, there was AI, it was around for a long time. All of a sudden, they reframed it to be consumer-centric and help you write emails and shit. So the same thing's going to happen. Somebody's going to, and somebody else is going to be a zillionaire and create something.
And beneath this all is one of the themes, I think, through this is the curiosity to constantly be on the front end of stuff. So Babs, we're almost out of time here. So take one of these two things: funniest story and or practical advice we haven't talked about on the air. Pick one and go with it, and then we'll roll to the end of the show.
Okay. So from me, you want practical advice or
practical advice we haven't talked about yet, or funniest story you can tell on the air?
I'll tell you one thing that I've been doing and being around. So I was a marketing executive for a long time. And the last 3 years, I've been an executive coach. I went back to school at Columbia and got this executive coaching degree. So I'm around coaches all the time now. And I'm always getting kind of these tips on how to increase your productivity. And I will say, I have like a, regimen now that's, to me, like incredible in how much it's increased my productivity. So here it is. Like when you wake up, do not hit snooze. Get right out of bed. And because there's all this research that shows hitting snooze drives all kinds of anxiety for whatever reason. I think because you're hitting it and then you're staying there.
It's avoidance behavior.
And you're not getting out of bed, right? So you hit snooze. And then that's followed by this idea of sunlight before screen light. So don't touch your phone or your computer until you've walked around the block, gotten a coffee, whatever, but just gotten out of the way. And for me, the biggest thing is working out immediately before the phone or anything, whether it's yoga, meditation, the gym, whatever, automatically makes me so productive all day because I think I just have energy from that. And then, other things like, I turn the shower cold or whatever. You do those things, and I promise you, your productivity will increase exponentially every day. So that's...
I was totally with you, Babs, until you turn the shower on cold. So
just at the end, you don't have to take a cold shower, but at the very end, make it freezing cold. It lights
totally
you up.
with you until we got to the cold. So I think that's a great way to run out the show. Thank you, Babs, and thanks to everyone for listening to CMO Confidential. If you are enjoying our show, please like, share, and subscribe. And look for all of our shows on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube, and the I Hear Everything Network, which include Marketing, The Battle Between the Believers and Non-Believers, Parts 1 and 2. Is the CMO job the hardest job in business? Is AI an extinction event for agencies? And a report from the media front lines. Hey, all you marketers, be safe out there. This is Mike Linton signing off for CMO Confidential.